So the world woke up to the news this morning that the SEC is suing Elon Musk over his now infamous tweet that said, quote, am considering taking Tesla private at $420, funding secured. Now, nobody wants to be sued by the SEC. That's never a good thing. But if I am at DOJ and I'm representing the SEC here, uh, let me pause this conversation by saying I am a licensed attorney, but I am in Nevada. I am licensed in Nevada only and admitted in the state of Nevada and at the federal district court, the trial court here in Nevada. So I'm not a securities law expert. None of that. These are just my personal thoughts and initial impressions, which are often wrong, even for lawyers. But back to the matter at hand. So Elon's tweet said, quote, am considering taking Tesla private at $420, funding secured. Now, if I'm at DOJ trying to represent the SEC here, I think, I'm in a solid position. It's a strong case, and I think I'm not going to have to do a terrible amount of work to bring Elon Musk to the table. But I'm going to see some glaring flaws in my case. Again, I'm not a securities law expert, but first of all, it's Elon Musk's Twitter page, right? 160 characters. I don't even have a Twitter account, so I don't know. 140 or 160 characters for Twitter, and it's his personal page. He's not doing it in his capacity as the CEO of Tesla. Now, he is saying, I'm considering taking Tesla private, so I think that argument's out. What judge is going to really... it's not going to give them more than a nanosecond's pause, I think. But what about the First Amendment? We have an individual here in the face of a state action now, a civil lawsuit from the SEC. And what if he's talking to the general public here? That's what it looks like to me. That word, considering, I think is the biggest flaw in the SEC's position. I haven't read the complaint. My position may change after I read the complaint. But this is just my initial impression of what's going on. And that word considering, to me, if I'm the SEC lawyer, the First Amendment gives me pause for sure. How am I going to get around that? It's the First Amendment, right? The right to free speech. And this is arguably an individual, albeit a CEO, talking to the public at large, saying, I'm considering taking Tesla private at $420, funding secured. Here, as in so many things, it all comes down to intent. And intent is going to be the hardest thing to prove. So what was his intent? Looking at the sentence itself, the plain language of it, am considering taking Tesla private. Who is he addressing? He's addressing the Twitterverse. This was not a press release to Tesla shareholders directly, and he's talking to the public. How do they know he wasn't welcoming their input? There's a tweet below from HeyDave7 on August 7th. Though I understand your reasons, please don't take Tesla private. There are hundreds of thousands of retail investors who have placed significant resources and risk into investing into Tesla for the long term and would not think it's fair. So, maybe Elon Musk cares about what the public thinks, and he was welcoming their input. This is not the board. This is not the board of Tesla asking, saying that they're going to take Tesla private. And I thought maybe he was joking. I initially didn't notice, a few weeks ago when this first all came about, when the tweet happened and the aftermath of the tweet happened, I didn't notice the $420. I actually didn't put two and two together with the $420 until he went on Rogan, and we all know what happened there. So earlier today, I've been thinking about this, and earlier today, I was thinking, well, maybe he was joking, and a joke would certainly go to intent. But I see now the Wall Street Journal has come out with a headline. Headlines can be misleading, and they certainly don't capture all the facts. But the Wall Street Journal is a storied institution, so maybe they got their story straight. Elon Musk, this is the headline now. Elon Musk believed he had verbal agreement with Saudis for Tesla buyout. And it goes on to say that he believed, according to a person familiar with the matter. That's pretty vague. Who are they talking about? Are they just trying to capitalize? I don't know. So, assuming it wasn't a joke, that gives me pause if I'm at DOJ also. Because if he really believed that he had funding secured, forget about the word considering. If he said, I am taking Tesla private at this price point and I have funding secured, if he really believed that, and you know, he wasn't insane, he was in talks with the Saudis, and for whatever reason came away from that conversation believing that he had funding secured, and he goes public with this statement to his Twitter followers, there's fraud out the window. Gone. Where's your intent to harm? There's no intent to harm. And there's not even, reckless is not the word I'm looking for, but willful. It's not even willful. It may be reckless, but if he had a verbal agreement with the Saudis, I mean, to me, that opens up an entire can of worms. Whose contract law applies? What was the nature of that conversation with the Saudis? Where was Elon? What contract law governs? That matters, because maybe that required a written agreement. Maybe it didn't. Maybe the verbal agreement was valid. Maybe he actually formed a verbal agreement, and now, you know, everybody's abandoned it afterwards. There are a lot of questions. So if I'm at DOJ, I'm looking at the language of the tweet. I'm looking at now, apparently there's evidence that he had a verbal agreement with the Saudis to get this funding. There goes your fraud charges out the window. There's no willfulness there. I mean, if he had a bona fide belief and a reasonable basis for that belief, no fraud, no willfulness, maybe not even reckless, perhaps negligent. And again, I'm not a securities lawyer. I don't know if negligence is enough. But I do wonder, at what point do we look to the public at large and the shareholders to have a little bit of common sense, right? And wait these things out, and don't make investment moves based on a tweet. Get excited, sure, but you know, like the Elon Musk blunt headline, use it. You know, you can latch onto it, but follow it and see where the rabbit hole goes. Make a note of it in your mind as a shareholder or a potential shareholder, or as somebody who's shorting the stock. I mean, at what point do you? Again, I'm getting a little off track. I'm not in my I don't have my DOJ, you know, pretend DOJ, hypothetical DOJ attorney hat on. But I mean, at what point do we as a society say, have a little bit of common sense? Consider the context. That's the problem with society often, is that we lose the context. So that's one reason I'm making this video. I'm trying to contextualize what's going on here. It's Elon Musk's personal Twitter, and it was not the board of Tesla coming out and saying it. It might have been a joke. It's a private citizen asking the Twitterverse, the public at large, not asking, saying, hey, I'm considering doing this. Considering. That word, if I'm at DOJ, I go, I know that's the weakness in my case. I should know, at least, that that's the weakness in my case. That and the First Amendment. You have a private individual talking to other private individuals in his personal capacity. And now there's a rumor, at least, unfounded or not, but if it's a founded rumor that he had a verbal agreement, or even if he, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what level of certainty is required, but to me, if he's 95% certain that the Saudis are, well, he said secured. If I'm at DOJ, I like that word, funding secured. So if I'm at DOJ, if I don't see a sufficient showing, evidence-wise, that Elon Musk willfully or fraudulently, with intent to harm, made this statement, I know my case is out the window. Again, maybe SEC can do something for negligence. I'm not a securities lawyer. I don't know. I would like to know. It's worth investigating. But if I don't see evidence to show willful behavior or fraudulent behavior, i.e., the intent to harm, I know my case is out the window. My position's a lot less. And I know also that it is probably, if it goes to beyond the initial phase of litigation, if it gets really advanced, this is going to be a First Amendment issue. Is this the same as yelling fire in a crowded theater? Maybe, but maybe not. And that's going to be the question. So I know if I'm at DOJ, I know, we'll see who's going to be on the Supreme Court. It's 8 justices right now, 4-4. So that's a crapshoot as well. If Brett Kavanaugh gets confirmed, I'm not familiar enough with his background to know, but he's a Trump appointee. And Elon Musk used to advise Trump. So would Brett Kavanaugh go to the Supreme Court and eventually hear a First Amendment challenge to anything the SEC does here? It's possible. It's possible. This is he's a well-known man. It's popular issue. What is the extent of your free speech right on social media, and at what point does that become an action where it's no longer speech, right? I mean, you have symbolic speech. Things like, generally acts are not protected under the First Amendment, but, flag burning, popular or otherwise, I'm not condoning or I'm not making any comment on flag burning, but that is an example of symbolic speech. Rightly or wrongly, the people who go and stand in the middle of a crowded street to block it, to protest police brutality or whatever, arguably symbolic speech. Maybe it's not protected under the First Amendment. Not all symbolic speech, I think, should be. But if you're going to hurt people, if you're going to go stand in the middle of a road and cause an accident, well, that's an example of when symbolic speech becomes harmful. So, as I see it, if I'm at DOJ and we have solid evidence to show, I'm looking at this Wall Street Journal headline here. If I'm a DOJ and I have good evidence to show that Elon Musk truly believed that he had a deal with the Saudis, I know fraud's out the window. My position is much less, and I know that if this continues to litigation and it becomes, litigation proceeds and there's a ruling, a judgment, and there's an appeal, the strongest argument is going to be this is First Amendment. This is Elon Musk in his individual capacity. He's a United States citizen, and he is talking to the Twitterverse in his individual capacity. And Should he have done that? I don't know. I don't know. He seemed to be careful with his words. That to me speaks intent too. Considering. He didn't even say I am. So who's he talking about? Am. He didn't start. There's no pronoun at the beginning there. It's just capital A-M. Am considering taking Tesla private. I mean, I guess am, I am. You wouldn't say they am, we am. All right, so am, that scratch that, strike that argument. But that word considering, that gets into his mindset. And look at the way it was drafted. It looks like it was flippant, right? Just in 2 seconds. I'm considering taking Tesla private at $420. Funding secured. He chose the word considering. Elon Musk is not somebody, he's a scientist, right? And a computer programmer. And if you've ever done any computer programming, you know for certain that if you aren't precise, you're going to have a hard time. Science is very much the same way. I mean, look at the SpaceX rockets that they did. I think it was 6 months ago, or I don't know when exactly. I think it was about 6 months ago. They landed 2 Falcon rockets side by side at the same time. Went into space. So Elon Musk knows precision, and he chose the word considering. And people who owned shares or shorted the shares, or were considering buying and then did after this tweet, whatever your role is, shareholder or not, if you're just considering it, look at all the facts. Consider the entire context and read carefully. I mean, you're putting your money at stake. Don't do it based on a tweet. Get excited, make a note of it, and then consider that fact, the fact of Elon Musk's August 7th tweet on his personal Twitter. Consider that in the context of everything. Elon Musk's history, his state of mind, what was he tweeting in the weeks before he tweeted this. Don't jump on a headline and make investments. That's not a good idea. So, if I'm at DOJ, I'm looking at this, and if that's true that he had a verbal agreement with the Saudis, I know my fraud case is out. I think they sued him for fraud. I have not read the complaint yet, and again, this is just my initial impressions. I am a licensed attorney, but I'm certainly not a government attorney, or I'm admitted to practice in the trial court federally here, but I'm not giving my professional opinion here. I am a licensed attorney, but this is not legal advice to Elon Musk or to anybody. These are just my thoughts. So that word considering, again, if I'm at DOJ and I'm representing the SEC here, I know that if that is true, if he believed he had a verbal agreement and a decent basis for thinking that he did, and that deal fell through or whatever, I know fraud's out the window. Maybe you get negligence. And in my experience, in this realm, in the federal realm, the legal realm, fraud is way worse than negligence, right? I mean, that's the difference between, intent matters, right? That's the difference between manslaughter and murder. Involuntary manslaughter is not first-degree murder. First-degree murder is laying in wait with malice aforethought. Malicious. You're really intending to do harm, whereas involuntary manslaughter is, maybe you dropped your phone on the floor of the passenger seat and you don't see anybody there, but the road looks clear, and you reach down, you take your eyes off the road, and you're going 35 miles an hour, and you pick up your phone and you look up, and boom, you hit somebody, you know, and they die. Perhaps you're looking at involuntary manslaughter. So you know, that is to demonstrate the difference where intent matters. The difference between involuntary manslaughter and first degree murder, you know, laying in wait with malice aforethought, and involuntary manslaughter. That's it's helpful in showing what the difference is between negligent behavior and fraudulent behavior. The intent matters. What was Elon's intent? So if I'm at DOJ and I read, Wall Street Journal saying he believed he had a verbal agreement, again, we're not going to read a headline and jump to conclusions, but I'm going to go, okay, well, let's find more out. Let's look into that. Let's find out about that, and seek more information. I'm going to want to talk to some witnesses at that point, because if that's true, if he had that belief, and especially if there's some documentary evidence to show it, I know fraud's out the window, right? And then I'm looking at negligence, and again, I'm not an SEC attorney. I don't practice securities law. I'm just an Elon Musk fan, and a fan of the legal field in general. So I don't know if just being negligent is enough. It's certainly enough for a civil lawsuit. But if I'm at DOJ, you know, and there's evidence, again, I'm repeating myself now, I apologize. But if there is evidence that he didn't have that intent to harm, fraud's out the window. I mean, if he really believed he had a deal with the Saudis, that's that. Done. Intent's gone. You fall from the equivalent, you know, it's like falling from first degree murder to involuntary manslaughter. The intent's gone, and without intent, you can't prove intent or willful behavior. I don't know about reckless. I don't know enough about this securities law to know if a reckless statement is gone. But if he really had a verbal agreement, then reckless, I think, is gone too. You know, I think this is a teachable moment. I've read, again, it's just headlines, and I haven't looked into this and haven't vetted this, but I've read that, you know, he's frustrated with people shorting the stock, and that's basically betting against the stock, and that's got to be frustrating when you are trying to be an up-and-comer. So, you know, I think go with the board, right? Let the board help you, Mr. Musk. You know, you don't have to do this alone. Get some seasoned business people around you who play hardball. This is the realm of hardball. I have a family member who likes to remind me that as a lawyer, I am now in the big leagues, and I'm not even in the big leagues of the big leagues. You know, SEC securities law at DOJ, that's the big leagues. But I do know enough to believe that if I was a DOJ attorney, I'm looking at that word considering and going, that's tough. And of course, there's going to be a First Amendment challenge to anything in the long run, I think, because it's a personal, private communication to the public and not directed at the shareholders. Where's the salutation, shareholders? There isn't any. And if that funding secured is true, or he had a reasonable basis for believing it was, I know that fraud is out the window if I'm sitting there trying to sue Elon Musk and Tesla. So anyway, I hope it works out for Elon and for Tesla. Big fan, and loved the podcast on Joe Rogan. Love is the answer, by the way. That is the way to go. And AI is definitely a threat. So that's what we should regulate. If we want to put government regulators to task, right? Tire the puppy of the government regulators. Let's teach them some code. Teach them a little bit about AI and how to govern it. Let's start thinking about that, because there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. And anyway, so I believe Mr. Musk will come out of this. I'm sure he's got the best attorneys in the world, and hopefully they're considering this isn't symbolic speech that is prohibited. I don't know how much symbolic speech is prohibited, but I think again, standing in the middle of a road and causing a pileup. I mean, it may start off as symbolic speech, but maybe it escalates to something more. But this tweet is not yelling fire in a crowded theater, and that is certainly true if he had an agreement for funding. If he did, game over on fraud. And I'm going, okay, Mr. Musk, pay a fine, sir. You know, negligence at that point. And I'm not trying to belittle DOJ attorneys. I respect what they do, and I don't know that I could ever do it. So I was demonstrating the enhanced weakness of my position. If that intent to harm, or even if I can't even prove reckless behavior, let alone willful or intentional behavior, the intent to harm, if he was trying to harm the people who were shorting the stock, yeah, I was salivating. But if you can't prove that, fraud's out the window. I know that. My position's a lot weaker. So I think it's a teachable moment for society in general, and we'll see how it plays out. If I'm a DOJ, I want to know if Brett Kavanaugh is going to get confirmed or not, because that's determinative too. And I think they sued in New York. I think that's the Second Circuit. I don't know enough to know. I mean, if you're going to do securities law, I guess you'd want the Second Circuit, right? You'd want New York courts, right? New York Stock Exchange. I mean, who is better versed in securities than those folks? So I don't know how liberal they are or conservative. I don't know how they go on these issues. I don't. Presumably, they've addressed First Amendment issues and First Amendment issues with respect to comments that CEOs make. I'd love to read that case law and see what they have to say. So, more on that later, I hope. I've already gone much longer than I expected, and I've got to get going. But that word considering, I'm considering. He didn't say he was going to do it. He never said he was going to do it. He didn't say when. There's no timeline. He just said, here's my thought. Here's my thought. So SEC have a case based on what we know so far, but they might not if that turns out to be true, that he had an agreement with anybody for funding. Because that's the premise, right? That's the premise of his statement. Funding secured. Okay. Shouldn't make that statement if you don't actually have the funding secured. But am considering taking Tesla private. He didn't say when. He didn't say he was going to do it. He didn't say, hey, Monday morning at 9 a.m. I'm taking this company private at $420 a share. He didn't do that. So I don't like to see DOJ and the SEC baby the shareholders. Let's have a little bit of Darwinism when it comes to shareholders. And maybe that's a modest proposal that shouldn't actually be borne out in reality. Again, I'm not speaking as an expert. I'm speaking I am a licensed attorney, but this is not legal advice. This is just my thoughts. And so, you know, it is what it is. We'll see how this plays out, but at some point, the shareholders need to take some responsibility. We need to stop babying people and teach them, oh, look at the greater context. Don't jump on a headline. Don't invest based on hearsay. What did Joe Schmo at the coffee shop say? I mean, be smart. Do your research. Do your homework. If you've shorted a stock, or you're in a stock, or you want to buy a stock, I guess the distinction there doesn't matter. But if you are in the stock market or considering it, do your homework. Study a stock for a little while. Get to know the players. Don't, whatever you do, make big time money decisions based on a tweet. It's one tweet. And if you're going to do it, read between the lines. Am considering taking Tesla private at 420. There's not enough there. If I'm in my right mind as a shareholder and I've got $1 million, there's not enough. I'm gonna go, okay, all right, I like what you're putting down, and I know the stock probably gonna shoot up on this news, but I'm not gonna be an idiot and think I'm gonna dump $1 million into this stock right now based on a tweet. I mean, that is reckless. You want to talk reckless? That's reckless. So those are my thoughts. I welcome comments, and again, my thoughts are subject to change. Facts change all the time, and I've not read the case law out of the Second Circuit or the appropriate court. I don't even know. Again, I'm not in this world. I just am applying some legal principles here and giving my thoughts. It's not meant to be legal advice to anybody. I have to say that because, again, I am qualifying all of this. So I did take con law during law school, though. I know the First Amendment is a thing. It's an individual, and he has the right to speak his mind. He needs to do it carefully, though. People are relying on him. So, Mr. Musk, people are relying on you. Hang tough. Love is the answer. And run your tweets by legal. Start doing that. Have legal on speed dial. We don't have speed dial anymore, do we? But I mean, run your tweets by legal. If you're going to be doing that, I know it's a hassle, but I'm a licensed attorney, and boy, I would love it if clients would let me know before they acted that they were going to act. Fortunately, I haven't had anyone, do anything to this extent, to this magnitude. So that's a good thing. But yeah, in the future, sir, please consider running your tweets by legal. I'm sure you have the best attorneys in the world, and they will let you know, Mr. Musk. I strongly advise against sending that tweet, or alternatively, if you insist, make this change. And then, maybe that change is, throw in hashtag tentative or something. Or hashtag maybe. I mean, if I'm your lawyer, I want to see more than that, I think. More than just hashtag tentative. Because apparently you're dealing with unsophisticated investors here. Or hashtag maybe. Hashtag maybe. Even millennials understand the word maybe. So, I hope this works out. I love Tesla. I don't own one yet. I love Elon Musk, though. He is the man. And the future is uncertain, but it is not as bleak as it looks, because I think there are holes in the SEC's case here. I'm looking at that word in black and white, considering. And I know I'm in the United States of America, and the Constitution still applies. And the First Amendment guarantees the right to free speech. This is a state action involving a private individual who made a statement to the public at large. And that statement, to me, does not rise to the level of fraudulent. It just doesn't. So we'll see how it plays out. Stay tuned, everybody, and I hope to supplement this video in the future, but we'll see what happens. We will see what happens. You know, I would love to spend a week studying Second Circuit law on securities. You know, how they view the First Amendment in light, you know, in the realm of securities and board members making statements to the public, and what does it mean that he did it in his individual capacity, and that he didn't do it, you know, in a press release, he didn't do it at a board meeting, he didn't do it at a shareholders meeting. That's the word I was looking for. So, I mean, these are all facts that matter. DOJ, they're sophisticated. I mean, they know. They know. They're not dummies. They're gonna. I mean, if they had an airtight case, why? Well, I don't know. The settlement offer doesn't, it's hard to read anything from a settlement offer, but they did make an offer. If I'm a hot shot lawyer at DOJ and I'm hot under the collar to win, I don't know. There are some things that give me pause. So even if I'm that guy who says never settle and do not under any circumstances give Elon Musk any breathing room, we want to nail him to the wall. You know, it's like that guy who worked for the Obama administration who said that the way he liked to operate, and you know, this is a terrible anecdote because I don't remember who it was or in what capacity, but I believe he was a regulator under the Obama administration, and he said, what we do is we go in and we do what the Romans did, and we crucify 5 people, and then that shows the world, you know, that shows the rest of society that we mean business. That is a terrible attitude for a regulator to have. That is a terrible attitude. I'm not suggesting DOJ has that attitude. I don't know. Prosecutors are supposed to serve justice first, and I mean, there's law that supports that. If you have evidence that supports the other side, you are not supposed to bury it. That's a big no-no. It's a constitutional violation. But if I'm like that regulator guy who just wants to crucify people, I am seeing some weaknesses in my case, especially the fraud case, and that word considering. That word considering. And no timeline given. So again, we'll see what happens. We'll see how it plays out. And I truly wish Elon Musk the best, because we need our geniuses in this country, big time. So you know, if something has to be done against him, you know, make it hurt, but don't incapacitate him. That's what I'd like to see. I mean, I don't know all the facts. If he is culpable and guilty, he should pay a price. But I don't think that he should be incapacitated to such an extent that he can no longer be of service to society. But maybe, depending on the facts, he needs the equivalent of a bark collar, or signs an agreement that he will run his tweets by legal, unless it's him at a barbecue, right? Or, hey, y'all, I'm going to the movies. So, yeah, a smarter populace, not smarter, I don't mean to imply the populace is dumb, but a more savvy, sophisticated populace would help too. Look at the context. Let's, as a society, agree to stop taking things out of context. So, in the context here being private individual on his private Twitter to the public at large, he's not the board. So, he's the CEO. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I hope it works out. I hope it works out. And I hope that SEC and DOJ know that Elon Musk is important. Given who he is and the times that we're in our international relations scenario, he's important. And I say that objectively. Even if I hated Elon Musk, and I love Elon Musk, but if I hated him, I know he's important. Very important. Just look at the bigger picture. Don't lose the forest for the trees. This is a genius. A genius. Once in a generation, once in a century genius. And we are facing darkened horizons on the international scale. The international relations realm, it's not looking good. So we need Elon. We need him being inventive and creative and useful. And if I were at the SEC or DOJ, I'd say, okay, Elon, we'll work with you, but you're going to help us write the regulations on AI, artificial intelligence. How about that? Maybe that's just a slap on the wrist to him. I don't know. But I do know he's important. And the public policy of protecting shareholders is important too. I don't mean to belittle that at all here, but I do think this, to get him for fraud on this tweet, especially if he really had a verbal agreement, that's over. That's over. It's not overcharging. What is the word I'm looking for? Maybe it is overcharging. But I think that if Elon's team can get the evidence that he had a verbal agreement, if I'm his lawyer, and I'm not, I'm moving for summary judgment on the fraud claim right away. I'm getting rid of that. There's no fraud here. There's no willfulness. Gone. There's no willful behavior. There's no intent to harm. Therefore, no fraud. Out the window. So if I'm his team, that's the evidence. That's what I'm doing. And hopefully his team does right by him. Hopefully they don't, I don't know who represents him, but I'm hoping they don't see, oh, billionaire client, let's milk this case. This can be great exposure for the firm. No, be professional. I hope they are. I don't know who they are, but if I'm loyal to Elon Musk as his attorney, I'm saying move for summary judgment. Get that evidence that there was a verbal agreement. Elon's word's not going to be good enough. That's going to be seen as self-serving. It's something. Look, going under oath and testifying, that's a big deal. But get the evidence. There's a verbal agreement, and then move for summary judgment against the state, against the SEC's fraud claim as soon as possible. As soon as possible. So, yeah, it's an interesting times we live in. It's certainly unprecedented, and sometimes the law has to catch up. So maybe that First Amendment law needs to catch up. We are in uncharted territory here, I think. But maybe the Second Circuit's considered a lot of the stuff. Maybe the Supreme Court has. SCOTUS. but I don't know. Wow, going on 45 minutes here. Did not intend for that to happen, but I am watching how this is playing out. I look at my Yahoo Finance app and see the headlines, and I'm concerned for Elon Musk, but less so after seeing that he believed there was a verbal agreement. And maybe SEC will back off a little bit. If I'm Elon's legal team, I'm saying get that evidence, and you get that to the SEC like yesterday that he had a verbal agreement. So because that verbal agreement, I think, depending on when it was, who knows the timeline matters, but if it was an appropriate time to justify him saying funding secured, context matters again, even that little tidbit. But if I'm at DOJ representing SEC and I hear there's a verbal agreement, I just filed a complaint, better believe I want to see that evidence because I want to know that I'm proceeding based on look, I mean, even if that evidence exists, there's nothing that suggests that I've seen that DOJ is acting wrongfully or doing anything wrong. But if I'm sitting there, I'm that lawyer, I'm that government attorney, and I hear a rumor, there's this evidence, I want it yesterday. So we will see how this plays out. It's not a game. This is a serious situation, but it's not as dire as it appears. And that word considering and the First Amendment and the verbal agreement. The headlines that say the SEC has a strong case, they're not wrong, but that headline doesn't tell the whole story. And it's not a slam dunk case at all. So we'll see what happens. Good night and good luck.